Good evening. Welcome to, is it working? Yeah, welcome to Real Love Guitars. Here I have a Squier Bullet Strat. This is Ray's new guitar. Just straight in from, I think it's geared for music actually. So it's a very basic, what's the word? Sunburst guitar, Stratocaster. Wow, frets are grubby, really poor. They're very fine too, so we've got thin frets, we've got strings that have got some black goo on them, we've got some basic tuners, we've got crafted in Indonesia, no less, no more, no less. And a simple rosewood type neck. I don't even know if that is rosewood anymore, but it's something very similar. It's not quite the same grain. And we've got this nice little protective thingy to go in there. We've got a decent-ish bridge. We've got a funny little bit of colour staining between the two of the three pieces of wood that go into making this, but actually it isn't so bad looking. We've got some fingerprints, that's okay, they come off. Everything else has got some protective stuff on it, and the neck is pretty much unfinished. There's a bit of a discoloration there maybe from a peg or something. So first things first, I'll just have a quick little listen, make sure it's okay. Been some kind of day here. I've been trying to get ready for various things, mainly a day down at the salvage place tomorrow doing a whole load of overdue routing. Anyway, I was putting together a Strat build, and I paid rare for me, but I actually bought a Strat body for a customer's guitar, and from Guitar Build, and I paid extra, believe it or not. Well, I had paid extra to have it made in swamp ash, and I paid extra, quite a lot extra, to choose the pieces, the lightest weight ones possible, which is cool. And then I paid extra again to have the holes drilled for oh god, what's it called? Hip shot bridge. Now that's really interesting because it's come back and the spacing's correct for the hip shot bridge, but it's 7mm out of position. But I think the problem that these people have got is I don't think they know that, because I don't think they've made a guitar with the hip shot bridge. Somebody's given them some measurements and they've stuck to it and shoved these things out the door. I'm pretty certain, and as a result I don't think anyone's ever, well, maybe not too many people have ordered it, maybe none of them have put it together and marked it up the way I have, and it doesn't work. The problem with the hip shot bridge is that it's too narrow anyway. But if you get it in the right place, it's fine. But they've got some measurement that puts it not in the right place for that, and it's particularly exaggerated. The problem is exaggerated by the narrowness, short depth of the bridge. Anyway, nothing I can do about it today, but it's totally messed up my schedule for that customer, and I'm beyond fed up. 200 quid's worth. So here we have a Strat. Now, looking at this, it looks to me like it's got a tusk nut, new bone. I've got a feeling they may have got that rightish. it's a bit weird. Why is it weird? Maybe it's not. See what happens when we give it a tug. Some detuning, but not as much as you might possibly. Sorry, I don't know where you're looking. Maybe not as much as you might expect. Sharp ends of frets, so we're going to need to soften those off. And we need to get the bridge, sorry, the saddle working. Nut, so it doesn't cause any friction on the strings. So this obviously needs stretching, and it's suffering from the standard problem that any guitar will suffer from out of the box. Now let's just hear. So to begin with, we've got quite a nice twangy sounding single coil there in the neck. Humbucking, noise cancelling. Yeah, they're both quiet actually. I'm getting bloody... pretty quiet anyway. So middle. Right. So standard till there's a Strat. It's all looking in order. A little bit of a buckle here, single ply white scratch plate. I mean, what strikes me straight away about this is that the frets are sharp and they're filthy. But you know, you could pretty easily polish those off yourself. Polish them off. Yeah, you could polish them yourself, and you know, it wouldn't be any great cost. It would just be some time, and you'd have a very much smoother playing guitar. What we don't know just yet is what happens when we drop the action. I'm going to start by taking off the plate at the back. I think I need a little container for bits and bobs. Just to keep everything together. So we'll take this off, and we'll just make sure that the tremolo is full in. Now I'm going to go back to my emails in a minute and just check, double check what we agreed in regards of the tremolo. It's got, of course, a small low mass bridge, as you'd expect, but it's a real budget guitar, and you know, actually it isn't such a bad thing for all its budgetiness. Sorry about this magic arm, it's a bit all over the place, a bit drunk. So we've got a fairly nice thin bodied guitar, nothing wrong with that, nice and light. You know, your low mass spring block and standard springs, reasonably well routed and all the rest. It's sitting up a little bit, I think partly because it's been done up too tight in the tremolo tremolo screws department, which is kind of tilted it on its little front edge. So of course the problem with that is you have to then move the strings if you're going to put this back. I do want to do that because I suspect in a minute we're just going to need to have it ready to set up in the end as a floating trem. I could be wrong, I will double check. We've got plastic dot markers, we've got a black Squier by Fender Stratocaster logo and a truss rod at the head adjuster at the headstock end. Okay, so these are I suspect fractionally too far in. Like I say, what you don't want them to be doing is to pull down this front edge of the tremolo. You want them to leave, you want it to have to be free so that when the springs are right, the tremolo sits flat as it is now on the deck. So that's your kind of start point. Now it may pull up again in a minute. So anyway, to begin anything, what I'll do is I'll start the precursor to setting up the tremolo. I will do up the tremolo claw screws, which is what you'd want to do if you're going to set the tremolo locked down. If you're not going to use it, then you want it in full like this anyway, pretty full in. If you are going to use it, then you want it that way as a start point for your tremolo setting. And the only challenge, the challenge of setting a tremolo in a floating position on one of these or any Strat is that, like any tremolo, like any floating tremolo, it's not rocket science in that it sits in a equilibrium between the pull of the springs and the pull of the strings, or I could say the pull of the springs and how far they're stretched by the claw setting, but we still call it the pull of the strings. That force is counters, at some point, counters the pull of your strings when they're up to pitch, the pitch you're looking to play at. In this case it's a standard E tuning. Right, I'm just going to get it up to tune. Give it some gentle pulls because we've slacked it down and done it back up. It's going to need a little bit of stretching to get stable. But then what we'll do is we'll get it to tune and we'll double check the email. Bit of friction there. Okay, that'll do for the purposes of our setup. Check the email. I've had to take loads of photographs of the Strat body that hasn't got the correct bridge positioning. Right, what am I looking for? Ray, Mr. Ray. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Guitar arrived. Let's go back a bit further than that. Go back into the beginning. Sorry. Okay. Okay, and you will have said details. Yep. Okay, floating trem sounds like the biz. Okay. Okay, that might not. Sorry, I'm just looking at this. So Ray may be picking it up on his way out of Cornwall. I must mention it. Has he given me the information? Alright, floating tremolo, strings 10. Okay, floating trem, strings 10. Strings 10. Now this will be currently on 9s, so it'll obviously make a difference, but it won't make that much difference to the setup part of it, so I'll leave 9s on. So the first thing I want to do is, given that we've now got it down at the flat end, I want to check the playing action, 3 kind of components. First of all, the relief. So hold down the first and the last fret and look at the relief on the neck, and there's absolutely none. So it is flat as anything, dead flat. So we're going to need to adjust that. We want some curvature in it. You can play a guitar with a totally flat neck. Oof, that's done up a bit stiff. You can play with a totally flat neck, but it constrains you in that your strings need a bit of room. I say, look, it's immediately given us back some space. It might even change a bit over time, but yeah, you want a bit of space for your strings to spin in the middle part. You can play with a dead flat neck. It just means you can't hit it so hard, because the harder you hit it, the more it moves. Or it means you may have to be limited in how low an action you choose to set, because the lower you go and or the harder you hit it, the more the string's going to move, and the more it's likely to hit the frets. So that loose Strat button, slightly loose on the other side, we'll take care of those. So let's look at what it came with. So default action on here is set to nearly 2.5, and it's probably 2.25 on the low E. I'll just keep a little record. Low E, last fret, 2.25, and the high E on the last fret is also quite high by my preferences. It's exactly the same actually, 2.25. It's about 0.7, no, it's about a millimetre higher than it ideally would be. So that's the first observation. The amount of curvature now is about right. I would say that's a little, maybe a fraction high, if anything. It's about 0.3. So I'll put a tiny little bit more of tightening back into it, clockwise tightening, but a very small amount. It's very sensitive, which is good. That's good. It's got some relief, but not much. And then what I'm interested in then, I'm interested in just checking what the first fret action is, and it's quite high now over these, which is great because that means I can reduce it to a nice light low action here, but also in doing so I can make sure that the slots are free running. Okay, so before I adjust those, I'm going to do the next major thing. I've just did the neck relief. Now I want to wind down counterclockwise, take down each of these strings to a spread from between 1.5 last fret on the low E as my start point in the spread. That's just a fraction under now. So I'm going to go from 1.5 across to about 1.25, something like that. And all I'm going to do with each string is I'm just going to go a fraction, a whiff lower than the one before. That's right, until I get down to, it's a sort of gradient down to the 1.25ish on the high E. So I've gone from 1.6 to still 1.6. Now, what you often will find is at this point, when you change the action, we'll retune it obviously, what you can find is this is where you might notice that any frets that are uneven. Now, I'm not assuming that this guitar will have them, because in the modern era you never know, these factories may have got the drop on this sort of thing by now, or they may not, but we won't assume anything, because my work will be much cheaper, I mean simpler, if the factories get the sort of fret leveling sorted. Okay, that's about right. Give me a fraction. 1/8 of a turn too low. try. Yeah, I can hear the strings pinging through either the nut or the string trees at the end here. Okay, 1.5 fraction down on this. Down on this one. Yeah, so I've been spending a lot of this, or today, getting ready for a router session down at the salvage place that I now go to, where I can get it done in peace. For as long as I need to do it, which is great, not having a rush. And in getting everything ready, it means I've got to get an absolute pile of templates together, and I've got to make sure I've got a template for every job that I've got planned. There's quite a few different things lined up, so it's quite a big operation, filling some plastic boxes with parts. Or I should say filling some of Adam's plastic boxes, his kit boxes with parts. So I've kind of got most of it together, and then also tonight I've got to book couriers for a couple of Beech's guitars and get those wrapped up tonight, ready to go off first thing tomorrow. And I was hoping, well, I'm going to have to write a pretty detailed email to Guitar Build, but I've taken a ton of pictures which explain what the thing is, but I'm not sure I'm going to expect anyone to understand it. The thing with this is, if they were to put the bridge on as I've just done and try it out, they would see straight away that they haven't got any movement in the saddles, because the distance with their holes in front of this particular bridge is too short. But it's the way they've made it, so a little bit of fret slap there, or string buzz. It's got some relief, so well, okay, so this guitar, I want to check now the notes. We've got pretty nice low action. Not too bad. Little cluster of Maddens up there. That's pretty impressive. I can't immediately see any evidence of a fret leveling in the factory, but that's not a bad set. I mean, the action I've set, there's a little bit of buzzing up here. And if you hit it really hard, you get a little bit of slap there. And Ray said that he considered himself a sort of medium style player, or medium strength hitter. So okay, So we will do a light fret leveling, in part because the frets, we've got a cluster, a little bit of choking up here, but mainly because, well, also because they're pretty grubby down this end, so it would be good to clean them up. So having set that action down here the way I want it, now comes the time to adjust the nut action, which is now going to be lower than it was when we first looked at it, because we've taken care of the first bit. And of course, you know, those three things are in many ways interrelated, interdependent. So you drop the first fret, sorry, you drop the action down there, and the first fret action reduces too, because you're closing the angle down. Equally, if you lower the action at the nut first, you'll see a small reduction in the last fret action as well. So it's kind of makes sense to do the neck relief first, check the kind of gross action here, and sometimes if the nut is really high, I'll put a capo on it and do the action down here, and then I know that I'll be coming just slightly above a capo type action when I've done the slots down here. So this does feel like it's a decent nut material. So I'm going to go on the if it ain't broke don't fix it principle, but they are quite deep slots. So the first thing to note is that although it's a nice nut material, it's going to be grabbing the strings because they're going to sit right down inside that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the height above, and it's quite a lot above it. Now for this sort of height above it, you may start to find notes going slightly sharp when you fret them, and that's one of the most important reasons for setting a low first fret action. I mean, the other reason is because it's a ton easier to play. Is this new bone? I think it is new bone. It's kind of a sandy sort of grey substance. Yeah, so having a low first fret action makes the guitar an absolute ton easier to play. It transforms how easy it is to play. It's pound for pound, it's the biggest improvement you can make for a small, if you had to, you know, a relatively small time investment. You know, it might take you an hour to get it right, but it's well worth doing. So the action is still really high, so it looks quite dramatic. So if you're doing it this way and you're starting to cut in with this V file, which I think is quite a good way of moving lots of material, it can be quite nerve-wracking because you're cutting in and the action is actually changing slowly. Now we're coming down towards it, so I'm going to take my third string file, and although I've done most of the cutting with the jeweler's file, I'm just going to use this file to round out the bottom of the nut, really, I suppose, the bottom of the slot. Now this, it's hard to say, but these don't, sometimes these just don't cut the way they used to when they were new, and sometimes even when they're pretty clean and well conditioned, they don't cut this new bone stuff very well. And it's one of the reasons why if I have to cut nut slots, I do tend to often steer clear of tusk unless I can set the height from underneath, which is quite tricky to do because it has a sort of slightly spongy way of cutting. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for 0.4 since we're quite a fair bit high anyway. Let's see. Oh, it's not the place I want to check it. Anyway, it's there. So we're nearly there on that one. Like I say, this file is on this material. It's just kind of bouncing off at the moment. And the problem with it is that it sort of, when it does cut, it sort of lurches forward, and you can very easily overcut it, no matter how careful you are. So right now, that file is actually refusing to move anything. Go back in with this one, and suddenly we'll be heading down to the right region. So I think I'm probably going to stick to this, knowing that it's tusk and it has that, or it's new bone, and it has that slightly resistant, non-communicative style. In other words, there's no bleeding feedback. So right now, you look at this and you think to yourself, oh look, I've got some ugly V-notch slots. But everything, if you think you've got ugly V slots, then the thing you should really look at is the fact that everything above where the string is sitting is superfluous. You don't need it, and having it kind of as a straight-walled trench that your string sits in doesn't do you or the string any good. In fact, it just makes it vastly more likely that it's going to get subjected to friction. So the first thing that I quite like doing this with the V file, first reason is that it just goes to show you straight away how much superfluous excess material you've got at work in this nut. Right, we're just on the mark now. That's where I'm going to stop. I'm not even going to round it out because I know that this material is soft and it kind of it doesn't make a precise shape at the bottom of the slot. So now that's a big pile different from where it was before, and I'm taking a conservative number. I've been caught out in the past by going for a sort of an absolute low down action, the lowest possible. You know, actually 0.3 isn't the lowest possible. You can probably get away with about 0.1, sort of. That's capo level first fret action. But the problem with that is that if the guitar goes to somebody with a different central heating, or the colder spare room wherever they keep it, then the small amount of atmospheric change can basically just rob you with any clearance you had, and before you know it, this beautifully set up, carefully set up guitar is buzzing and annoying its owner, which is absolutely no good for them or me. So I have to sort of train myself to hold back a bit, which I'm trying to do here, because it just, like I say, I've been doing 0.3 forever, and there is a small percentage of getting caught out that happens with that, and it just doesn't, there's no point. Okay, so now we've got nice fair high action over it's just not that extreme over the first fret, but we'll need to do the same thing again and just open it up. Now this one, the thing about whatever you use, my recommendation would be to use whatever cuts reliably well in the circumstances or the situation you're in. So I'm doing this with this because I know it's cutting this type of material. If I went at that with these Japanese files, we would be there forever, and I guarantee you at some point it would overcut, and then we'd be looking for a new nut and starting from scratch, and it's totally demoralizing to have done 5 slots and then hit the landmine on the 6th one. So I would rather use something whose way of cutting I'm confident of, because as far as your guitar is concerned, all it cares is that the string comes up the back of the nut and launches off the front point of the nut, so it has a bit of a slope and a clean point to launch off, and that's your correct intonation point. So the actual angle of the nut, the angle of the slope that the string comes up is not absolutely critical. As long as it runs off the top of that nice sharp edge at the front, and sometimes it takes a while. Yeah, just on the mark. It takes a while before you get to the action you want. You just have to keep on plugging away at it very gently. Now I'm holding these out in case I do want to use these, but right now I'm quite happy working with the V file. Now this one, again, it's quite, all of these were deep slots to begin with, so I'm opening them all up, and the bigger ones I'm going to just make a point of rounding out the bottom, because the diameter of those strings is a little bigger than the point of this thing, and it's actually quite difficult. You can very easily end up with this spongy material sitting inside the slot, acting as a little pad, and that isn't going to do you any good either. I'm busy experimenting with some adjustable Strat nuts. I've made some very comfortable now with my Les Paul adjustable ones, which are a combination of Graphtec adjustable saddles. Adjustable nut for Gibson. Combination of that and some resin hard plastic bases that I've made and customized. I started off using Milliput, which worked, but for my liking was a little bit soft, so I didn't ever feel completely confident in that, so I've carried on looking for alternatives and have arrived at this Plast-Aid stuff, which is well expensive, but it makes quite a robust nut base, and that allows me to repurpose these Gibson adjustable nuts, which isn't a bad thing at all. In fact, it makes this job much easier because you've got the adjustability. I'm thinking with the resin, the new resin I've got, it would now be in the realms of possibility to make a base for a Strat. The only problem with the Strat base is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to avoid, I've made nuts for Strats before, adjustable ones, and they sit, the little grub screws sit on the rosewood, and they compress that wood a little bit over time, and customers have found that you need to make a little adjustment down the line for that, which of course you can do because the nut is adjustable, but I would rather have a solid something at the bottom of the slot, but of course you have to find a way of introducing something solid enough to do the job, but it doesn't require digging the slot any deeper or reducing the actual thickness of the working nut to a point where it doesn't actually function very well or isn't strong enough. Don't want it snapping around the grub screws. Anyway, so I'm going to do some more experiments. Okay, I'm where I like to be. Not far off this one actually. It's probably the best one of the lot. But again, same sort of principle, that it's got a relatively narrow slot, which is causing friction. This is where I lose my fingernails every time. Now at this point, as you can probably see, it looks like we've got a really shaggy nut, and it looks a bit grotty because, you know, we've worked it away from the factory norm, but there isn't really an alternative to that. And you know, I've always been clear to point out that my priority is playability, and if I have to reduce or cut these slots down to get that playability and get rid of any tuning problems around the lower frets, then I'm going to do it regardless of the fact that it's going to make the nut look like something. I remember years ago, before, I suppose it was before I knew anything about what was going on, I remember it's all the thing that when you put your strings on, we all sort of used to believe that a properly fitted nut was one where, you know, there was a little half cup shaped slot and the string sat in that gracefully, and that was easy enough to do. You know, people the manufacturers used to make these perfect little half circles for the strings to sit in, but they stood sort of 6 millimeters high above the first fret, so it was, although it looked pretty, it was absolutely useless as a playing experience. You know, all the lower notes down by the nut would be out of tune and so on and so forth, so it would be a real waste of time. So at this point I'm listening and feeling for linear progressive tuning. It's improved a lot. The notes are changing. I can hear it. It's making a little pulling, little creaking noise on these string trees, butterfly things, which I don't like. Sounding and playing great. I'm just going to do a quick check, although we're changing strings in a while. I'm going to check the intonation to see how approximately near we are to where we want to be. It's going to possibly be slightly different with the tens. Technically it shouldn't be that much different, but that's what? I'm tuning the wrong string. It's an E, Captain, but not as we know it. Not bad. That's not bad at all. We'll check it again when we restring with tens, but as a out of the box that would have been pretty okay intonation wise. Right, okay, well that's the action part set up, obviously minus that thing tremolo. So what I'm going to do now is what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to level the frets very, very lightly. So what I'm going to want to do is just move some strings around and do what I can to colour the tops of the frets. Now, while I'm doing this, it's a chance to get a look and a feel. Sometimes with the pen, you can really feel what's been done before on these frets, and they're actually, I can't really feel the evidence of factory levelling, which is really good because they've got it very close, very good. You know, it works well with a low action. I mean, it's looking like there's some little flat spots here already but that's from playing and wearing away the tarnish that's built up while it's been in the factory or the shop, or the warehouse I should say. Now obviously I'm not going to do anything with the nut right now. I'll save reshaping that, tidying that up for a little bit later on. And what you're going to see is that the actual volume of the nut required is tiny, so it's going to look like a very thin strip, simply because there's no value in all of the material above the place where the string sits in the slot. So this is really the principal thing here, is cleaning up the frets. We're going to soften the frets up when we come to polish out, which then can take care of the sharpness of them. But the main bit is to free up the slight buzzings at the top end on the low E and the A. That's really the only areas where there were any problems. Okay, so I just want it in tune again, only for the tension sake. Feels good. Right, so now we are into the fret leveling mode. Speaking of, as we were speaking of adjustable nuts, I know that Ian was asking, could I demonstrate making an adjustable nut for Les Paul, and in fact I did a video on how to make them with bone for Strats and Tellys, but I haven't actually done one showing how I make one up for the Les Paul, which well, the Gibson style 3-a-side, so I have to do that. So what I'm doing right now is I'm tuning this 46cm truss rod to the point where it pretty much matches the curve of the neck that we set earlier. And having done that, I then just get the string out of the way, drop it off, and I'm going to very lightly level. Somebody asked in the week on the YouTube video about if the truss rod's shorter than the whole length, doesn't it bang into, well, they were finding that it knocks into the first and last frets. Well, it will do, but you can see this is going over the first and last fret without doing any major clonking or damage. Right, just looking at this, it's cutting pretty evenly across everything, so and given that it wasn't a problem on any of those notes before, we probably will only improve that. Fine, sweet, sweet. There we go. I'm going to recalibrate. It's the same. I use the same position effectively for the high E and the B, but I just like to recalibrate between each one to make sure I've got the curvature in the tool that I want. People have asked me, what do I do about fall away, or fall off, roll away, fall away. And interestingly, I've just never found a need for it with this method. So, and I have some nerdy, kind of boring theories of why that is, but suffice to say, I don't ever find myself needing to. Don't find myself ever needing to cut a backward slope at the top here that some people do. A lot of people do on things like Les Pauls, and there's a reason why that is. In part because the Les Paul has a sort of rigid section of the neck where it bolts and glues in, glues into the mahogany body and thickens up at the same point, so it's hardly surprising that it doesn't respond very flexibly to truss rod adjustments in that area, and so it sort of plateaus a little bit, and a traditional technique for taking care of that plateau is to try and scrape the frets backwards in a sort of gradient away from that point, on the sort of basis that if the next fret is clearly lower than the one before, then you won't have any problems, and so on until you reach the end. As I say, I've never suffered from that problem with this method. It seems that if there's a knuckly part where the neck stops being a curve and plateaus out, not so much of a problem on a bolt-on neck like this, but if there is that sort of plateau, it's the join of the plateau and the curve that's the real problem. but it's never so large or extreme a knuckle, I call it, as to not be sorted out by this gentle linear smooth curve on this tool. So I'm really happy with that, because like I say, you just never have to worry about that. Just get on and do this. So and it is, I'm pretty certain it's because this nice smooth curve just takes off that obstruction wherever it hits it up near the joint where the neck joins the body. So people often keep saying to me, oh, I didn't see you doing any fall away, run off, whatever, slope off, and I just never do, so that's how it goes. So this is some little flies. I've heated up the shed and some little flies are coming out to play. That's not bad at all. It's discouragingly light, this bullet. That's my only personal preference. Is I don't like guitars that are quite this light, but I know a lot of people do, and so it's perfect for them. I've just been doing a load of weight calculations today on making a Les Paul, a slab type Les Paul, with some chambering, and I've managed to get it all down to what will be about 7 3/4 pounds in weight, which by all accounts is, I think somebody I saw online, somebody was saying that 7.5 was a target for a chambered Les Paul, and of course mine will have chambers and some weight relief, so that's partly what I'm going to be routing tomorrow. So I had to prepare templates. It's not bad at all, much better than it was. Okay, we're now in the final track, the E, low E track, and we do the same thing again, just recalibrate. The recalibration shows that across the radius of the guitar, the relief can sometimes change a little bit. It's quite weird, but it does, just ever so slightly. That's good. So once I finish this tonight, then I will be actually got some late night spraying to do. The humidity in here is pretty low since I've been here most of the day, so I've heated up a bit more, and I think I might do some undercoat spraying. I had an idea that I would take this guitar that I need to spray. I've also got to do some routing on the body. It's one of Adam's kits, and I was going to take it down, spray the undercoat tonight, take it down there tomorrow, route the shapes, and then spray the last spray the last blue paint that I've got, and then I've got to wait for some more to arrive. Kind of didn't manage to coincide the two things. So Adam's sending me some more paint just out of sequence with my time to I was hoping to do spraying at the same place, but actually, if the truth be knownst, it's probably not the best place to do it. It's probably better in here once it's dried out a bit, but it's going to have to be late here so as not to poison any neighbours. Okay, so at this point now we've got the frets beautifully level for that nice low action, and low action being at both ends. We've got the correct amount of relief for these strings, but as I say, I think pretty sure these are 9s, so we need to double check the relief when it comes to putting the new strings on. We'll also double check and tweak the intonation when we put the new strings on. I think I might take a preemptive step and replace these with Tusk ones, because it's actually, you might as well. I mean, it's 14 quid or say 8, 9 quid, no, 10, 12 quid, something like that. I'm sure Ray would rather have that little bit of investment in it than not, since he's invested in the setup. I think that would be a good call. I've got some in stock as well. So. Okay, this is a set of 9s that I can reuse for a tremoloed Strat. The other thing too, by the way, is if we're going to use the tremolo in floating mode, then I don't want strings pulling against metal butterflies. It's amazing how many of the Fender guitars still have those things, but you can hear them creaking against them sometimes. And whilst I don't necessarily think that it will actually create too much friction, and if you get your nut slots right, then the extra bit of added friction from the trees, string trees, is going to be minimal, but it's still annoying when you've kind of got everything else running really smoothly. And you know, you don't want any friction at all if you're using a tremolo. It's as simple as that, or the minimum. You're always going to get friction because the strings are physically touching something at some point, but you want the least amount possible. Now I'm going to add a little marker or a little, I usually make a mistake and put it around all the strings and then it gets totally stuck. I'm going to put it around one string, and Strat 9s I'm going to call it. Strat 9s. Oh my lordy. 9s. Hang 'em high. Right. Okay, then I'm going to throw a rag on the floor, just clean off some of the dust. It's not a lot because we didn't really do that much leveling. Now the next thing to do, you can probably see, if we get close up, quite big notches in there now, but what we can also see is how much of that nut is completely superfluous to our requirements. So we can get out some sandy paper type thing like this, which is quite easy to use and fairly safe to handle around the frets. You obviously have to be careful you're not going to crash this into your frets and damage them. So there's quite a lot of what do you call it, new bone material coming off there. I also just scrape down here, and any little bits of swarf that comes off the nut can be picked up, because that also looks a bit shabby. So we're still quite a lot of excess material. This stuff never really shines up, so if you're cutting down new bone, I wouldn't bother trying to chase it to a shiny finish. I don't think you'll actually get there, and you probably spend quite a lot of time trying. Now as you get down a bit, you know, the thing starts to look tidier anyway, but it's even still got quite a lot of, let's push that against its strap button, still got quite a lot of excess here, so it's actually still more than you need. The thing about the nut shape, by the way, is that you can sort of tilt it backwards if you want, but once you've cut your slots, and so long as your slots are tilted backwards, it doesn't really matter what the top of the nut itself is doing. It could, for all intents and purposes, be sloping forward, providing your string slots are going the opposite way. Okay, so that's tidied that up. I'm not going to pursue it with any other kind of grades of paper. It actually looks neat and tidy now. We've got rid of an absolute ton of the waste material that we didn't need. It also makes, you know, if you're thinking about using low-cost tools to do this, for example the V-notch file, it's also done this in a way that you'd be hard pushed to tell that was a V slot full stop. You know, it just looks like a slot that, you know, the string's meant to fit in. Okay, so Now we've got some less than ideal, what's that stuff, masking tape. Oh, I've got something else to do first. Here's me forgetting a whole stage. I'm going to, when it comes to it, I'm going to cut back. I will mask off the fingerboard, and instead of going around the whole thing, I'm just going to, on these, I'm going to just leave it on the face. It's a bit risky because it sometimes peels off while you're doing the polishing, but I'm doing that because I don't like this tape. I'm in a famine of quality low tack tape, so I've had to buy, I've had to compromise with some other stuff that's just bog standard, and it's a bit horrible. And I've bought some, for the really sensitive things, paint masking, I bought some paint masking tape, which is a ton more expensive, but at least I know that when I'm masking off for a spray job later on, at least I know that it's covering the edges nicely. So I'm okay using this, but I will just confine it to use on the fingerboard. Okay, so having leveled the frets, that means we put some slightly mild, very small flat spots on them, and so I'm going to now use the StewMac fret leveling file to just run across the frets, and just what it does is it takes off the shoulders, if you like, of any flat spots and reverts the fret to a nice arch shape. The kind of speed I'm running across these kind of gives you an idea of how little actual leveling is needed, apart from a couple of spots on this base side here, but most of it is just whizzing through because it hardly took anything. And if you do use this method, one of the things that, looking back now, I probably could have written more about in my ebook is what it's like when you first do this, and how you know what the tendencies are to feel like you always think you've done more than you have, usually, and so a lot of people get very nervous and sort of can be quite convinced they've ruined their frets sometimes, and in fact they haven't done it for very long at all. A couple of ways to help that is to stick to the 400 grit or even 600 on your fret leveling beam, or the banana as I call it. If you stick to a very low grade, then you cut the fret very slowly anyway, and it will be difficult to make a total disaster in a hurry. But like anything, you can achieve that if you really set your mind to it and keep going, but it's hard work. So I think the tendency is to panic fairly early on, before you've done any real damage. So that's re-crowned or reprofiled the frets. And you're saying, why are you wasting all these bits? Well, I don't know, it's just easier to hold it. What I then need to do is, and I'll go off camera for that boring stuff, so I need to cut a load of strips, still with this slightly sticky, feels damp, this stuff. I mean, it's masking tape, if sure enough, but it has a sort of dampness about it, because I think because it's got more glue in it, or it's more saturated with glue than the low tack stuff. It's probably as simple as that. But anyway, so I will cut a load of strips to go and cover up the thinner frets. A lot of people over time have said, why do you level frets with the neck on and the strings on? And there are a number of small reasons, but the principal one is the simplest of all, and that is, by having the strings on, I can stop as soon as I've leveled enough as it takes to make the action I've already set play. Right? And actually there's no other method you can achieve that same thing. And what's the benefit of being able to stop when you've achieved playability of the action you've set, your target action? And the positive of that is that you don't take any more fret metal away than you absolutely have to. Other methods are kind of arbitrary in that they use a fret rocker. something I'm going to do. Something I've got to do first. I should have done it before I put all the tape on, but anyway, I'll do it now. Yeah, other methods are kind of arbitrary in that they level to a given absolute levelness. In other words, you'll check the frets with a rocker, and then you'll level them until there's no rocking noises, and that means that they are relatively, or they are absolutely level. And the truth is, that's fine, and it works, and that's how I started doing it, and it's a great improvement on unleveled frets. But the truth about it is that in doing it that way, you are taking more metal than you need, more fret metal than you need, because you are leveling to an absolute, which is never needed. If you think about it, you only need the frets to be leveled as much as they need to be leveled for the action that you've chosen to play. And of course, that action is never 0. It's always, you know, a millimetre or a half, or a millimetre or 1.75, whatever your preferred playing action is. So with the strings on, you can level to your personal choice and stop exactly at that point. And the only way you can know you've reached that point is by having the strings on. And it's great because you can actually hear and feel the buzz and the choke disappearing. And it's the only method, the only way of doing it, you can actually hear that. So that's the principal reason why I do it that way. The fact that it is a small fraction, and I mean a small fraction, more accurate, is actually it's a bonus. It's not the reason I do it that way. It's not for an end in itself. It's a little extra bonus. But so it is principally for the minimising the amount of fret metal used. Now that means, of course, is that let's say I set an playing action of, you know, whatever it was, 1.5 on the low E, and let's say you want to go lower than that at some point, because I've levelled to ensure that that 1.5 action plays. If you were to set the action lower, you would find that you might find buzz coming back in. All right, and that's just the way it is. But since the fret metal is kind of literally the life of the frets, I personally think that it's a better option to conserve it wherever possible, hence the method I use. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking off the little sharp corners left by the fretting of the beveling machine or whatever they used to trim these frets all flush, and it's just a little bit of, just taking a little bit of that sharp edge off, and it's quite difficult to get in there when you get up to this end. We're just taking the sharp tangs off, or burrs I suppose you'd call it. And once I've done that, then I do something else, and there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can either take the neck off at this point, or if you want to, you protect it with some tape. There's some big stuff. The trouble is with tape at this stage is you may end up losing the cellophane covering pick guard and whatnot, but it's a good way to just give it a bit of protection. So I'm just trying to give it a couple of layers, so in case I miss, I'm not going to scuff anything. It's only cheap masking tape. So what I do now is I'm getting a 240 grit, and I'm going to go up and down the edge of this fingerboard with this 240 to deliberately soften out the machine or the block cut frets. So I'm going to take it like this, and I'm using a kind of mixture of finger and sandpaper. So this is going to take away any sharp bits, and also when I'm at it, I kind of want it to roll over the top edges where the frets have been beveled too, so that we get a kind of little bit of wear there to take the machine sharpness. We can turn it around and do the other side, similar fashion. It's a little bit clumsy to do it this way, but we'll get there. Hence, this is why the masking tape is quite useful at this stage. Now you probably will catch the rosewood on the edge at this point, but it's worth it because softened off frets feel so much nicer, and as soon as the rosewood gets a little bit of finger oil in it anyway, you will barely notice that it's been run over with this sandpaper. And I'm tilting in right off into the fret so I can just round off those very sharp bits. Okay, so there we have already smoothed that off considerably. Right, I'm going to do the cutting business of a whole set of strips, and then we'll go from there. I'll see you back. Where am I going to see you back? I'm going to see you back when I'm restringing. See you in a minute. Hello, we're back. Frets polished, fingerboard oiled. Definitely doesn't look like rosewood. It's got a different look to it altogether, but hey. So what we're going to do, I'm going to load up our 10 gauge strings, and we're going to get it up to tune and check everything. Stretch out the slack and all that stuff. It's very important to do that, stretch out the slack before we do anything with the tremolo. But there's no reason why even the most humble Strat tremolo doesn't work, providing your nut slots are good and your strings are already stretched out, because the stability of your tuning comes down to those two components really: the slack in your strings that hasn't been pulled out, and the free runningness of your nut slots. And if you get those two taken care of, you'll see that the tremolo works great. And it gets a bad press because loads of people who don't understand where the tuning stability comes from blame the tremolo. And the tremolo, all it's doing when it goes out of tune, it's kind of highlighting the other problems. It's not actually making the guitar go out of tune. I'm going to throw this scrap away a minute. Well, the fact that I've managed to get anything done this weekend at all since I did my backing on Friday, I've been able to keep going, which is great, just about. So yeah, I'm a bit miffed because tomorrow I was all lined up for this routing session, and it was all kind of based around getting this Strat done for this customer, and it was on a tight turnaround. So you know, the company that made the body got it back to me on Friday, I think it was, last week. So just in time to line up routing session this week, get the extra humbucker route done, and then I'd be into finishing the guitar. However, this mess up with the bridge now has meant one of two things. Either I replace the hip shot bridge with a sort of standard Chinese thing, which will just about work, but even then it's not ideally where I'd want it, you know, because obviously the neck, the holes and everything aren't geared up for that. They were supposedly made for a hip shot, albeit in the wrong position, slightly in the wrong position. So we've got a problem. Either if I carry on and go ahead and try to finish the guitar, I can make the deadline of Christmas to get it back and get it to the customer, or I demand another one with the recalculated position for the bridge. But I think the problem with this is that their problem is that they won't have made one themselves. I mean, they'll have maybe possibly made the body and sent it out to somebody, but they'll never have made the body and then gone ahead and tried to fit the bridge to it, at which point they would have gone, we can't intonate this properly, what's happened? So the kind of reason for questioning the numbers they've been given by Hipshot for the positioning, you know, I don't even know, maybe Hipshot's got it all wrong the way they measured it, but who knows either which way. When I decided to use this bridge, which I had left over from another project, when I decided to use it, I already knew this bridge had no leeway for getting in the wrong place, and I thought, oh great, okay, I'll position it myself then. If I'm going to use it, I'll be able to position it, and I know that it has no positional leeway. And the reason for that is because it's about a quarter shorter than any other bridge you'll find, and that's one of its flaws. That shortness of length combined with its extra long saddles, the two things together make it practically unusable. And it's already turned out to be unusable on one project that I was going to use it for, and because of the incorrect spacing thing, it's now got no, as I say, there's no leeway to put it down and move the saddles around to counter for the stupid incorrect positioning. So that lack of leeway just means I can't use it. So I've got to speak to them tomorrow morning, but that's before I go on my routing trip, because if they say no, you've got to send it back to us and we'll send you another one, that's the project done. I won't be able to meet my customers' expectations, which will really pee me off completely. Then there'll be no point taking it in to route the humbucker space. So, or they might say, okay, look, in this case, I think, you know, we'll check and make sure we update the distances or spacings or whatever the next time we do this. But in the meantime, can we give you, 50% off, and you can modify it or use a different bridge? In which case, I could use a different bridge, and then at least I could meet the customer's expectation of having it before Christmas. But it's not ideal because it was a quality bridge that I wanted to use. It was a nice looking bridge, and it's changed. Changed what I can do. And even putting that Chinese bridge on now, I've taken careful measurements to see if there's anything I can find that's a bit higher quality that will fit better. But basically, Guitar Builders now confine me to a set spacing, which is really not that great for me. Right, so I'm going to do some stretching, and then I'm going to do some stretching again. It's all boring stuff. Somebody commented that they like to tune up half a tone the night before and then play it for an hour or something, and then it's in tune. I can promise you that will not rid you of your slack. It will definitely, I don't doubt it will go in tune, but I bet you I could grab it and pull it out of tune quickly. Now, just before I do anything else, let's just check the relief. Still good. Hit the knob. Feels good. Feels good. So I'm going to do a bit more stretching using thumb and forefinger to get this as level or as stable as possible. Then I'm going to set the tremolo floating. I'm going to use the Galeazzo Fredua method. Now this this method still requires updating, mainly because he never solved the problem that when you float the tremolo, obviously the saddles rise up. Now his method was great for calculating the amount of pitch movement, and it's brilliant for that, but that was at the expense of your playing action. So what I discovered that to make this work we have to knock off 0.5 millimeter out of our action before we set the tremolo using the Galeazzo Fredua method, which I will now get lined up to do. So it's quite interesting. We'll use this new tremolo that comes with this bag of desiccant. Right, so we're going to use this. The time is right. Well, we'll need to do it soon. Well, let's do the thing I said. Let's knock down the action by 0.5 mil all round. It's going to be a certain number of turns, but let's see if I can work it out. This is a guesswork, by the way. I've done this before and I guessed it. So let's see how many it takes to do on here. 1/2 one, 1/2 one. What do we get? No, still not. Whole one. Whole one. Okay, let's go whole one on each for now and see what happens. Whole one. Whole one. Whole one. Whole one. Whole one. You'll only understand what I'm doing, or you only get the reason for this if you try and do it yourself and then discover that the action changes. The tremolo gets set perfectly and the range of pitch bend is just right, but what doesn't work is the action. So I'm lowering it down now to compensate for the up increase when we set the tremolo floating. So first of all, we still need a tune. Right, here's the fun bit. So we need the tuner, we need the lead. What we're going to do is we're going to check where we're going with the tuner. So the first thing we do, we get the tuner on. Let's see if I remind myself. Right. Okay, so the first thing we do is we get the tremolo arm in. Let's screw this in. And then we're going to, well, it says lift up the, it says get the back of this thing lifted off, but actually it's in perfect position as it stands. So what we're going to do, well, that's stiff, so that's fine. We're going to tune to G lying down. What's happened here? Oh, that's I'm not plugged in. Oh, that would help. So what you do is you start with the G and you press the tremolo down. It's probably better to do this on the floor, on the bench. Press the tremolo down till you've got E, and put as many post-it notes under there as it takes to keep it at that G string to be E. Okay, so I'm pushing under, holding them there. That's close enough. Then what you do is you tune everything to pitch. I'm going to put this under here now. So you go tune it back to G. If I can get it to play. Now we're tuning it with the tremolo tilted forward. And then we're going to let go of it once we've got it all to tune. And then when we let go, going to go drop back to even higher pitch. So once it's tuned, take this out, and everything goes sharp. And what we do next is the magic. Remember we tightened up the claw bolts until they were right the way in, screws. Now what we do is we take this G, which is now an A, and we tune it back to G by slackening the bolts at the back here. A few turns on each side, keep going, and you'll see the pitch of the note go from, what was it, an A? Well, it's above A, but it's going to come down, go below A, and then we're going to get to G. And then, as I'm doing this, as I return this to its set correct pitch, what happens is the back of the block will rise up. We're at A, we've still got to go down. It's a very simple system. But as the tremolo claw, as the block rises up, so this action is going to go up. Right, G sharp, above G sharp, and so the half a mil I took off is going to be replaced. Now I'm guessing, this is, you can be a witness, I'm hoping my half a mil drop is going to be enough to regain that good action. If not, we're going to have to redo it and add in more reduction before we do this. Oh, careful, before we do this. Out of my way. Sharp of G, coming down. Stomach rumbling, I'm starving. Just slightly flat, half a turn each side. Slightly sharp. Quarter of a turn down. I'm being very precise now. There we go. Now what we've got is an in-tune guitar again. With a floating tremolo. And the tremolo is floating exactly at the right position now to give us the correct preset range of ups and downs. So on the high E, it's going to go up to a semitone, tone on the B, and a tone and a half on the G. And there we have it. Oh, and the important bit is, what action did we end up with? Exactly, half a mil. We've done the formula. Half a mil. I mean, it's going to change depending on how high the things are on the stilts at any time. If it's very low, it isn't going to be 1/2 mil, but 1/2 mil in this case, and there we have it, beautifully set up. Nut cut right, lowered, tusk string trees, all traces of friction removed, no more scraping, lovely tremolo action. Back into tune. See, 90 something pound guitar staying in tune with tremolo being used. How about that? We're going to put this plate back on, ladies and gentlemen, and we are done. I'm leaving the cellophane on so that Ray can have the joy of removing it himself, and then we're just going to take this back in the house. And we can actually send him off an invoice tonight. We could, you never know, get it in the deliveries that's going out tomorrow with the other two. But in a way, what's beautiful is that this floating tremolo is actually more accurate now and better than the 200 quid Carla flyer or whatever it's called that is on the Aria to Night Warrior Night, or whatever it's called, Night Warrior Night, which is a beautifully engineered, complex thing, but after X number of years, currently won't return to pitch after an upward bend. But love it. Simplest tremolo. Don't malign the Strat tremolo on a £99 Bullet Strat. That tremolo is as sweet as you like. Stay in tune, because stretch nut slots, then your tremolo will behave beautifully. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was useful. I hope it surprised you how well the tremolo on this budget Squier works. It's a brilliant little system. Fender got it right the first time round, and you too can have it right if you just have the patience and the discipline to stretch your strings, and don't believe you can just give them a tug and it's all done. Right? It isn't going to happen like that. You have to stretch them very, very firmly, and then you also have to get your nut slots done properly too. And once you've done that, you are smiling. But if you don't do that, you will be whimpering, because you'll go out of tune straight away. So this is the bits and bobs. We'll leave the tremolo on. Will we leave it on? Yeah, we'll leave it on. Old string trees are in here in case Ray ever wants them again, and that's us done.